today we're proud to announce that we are welcoming back Jennifer Opal. She's a multi-award winning DevOps engineer, technologist, technical blogger, keynote speaker, and neurodiversity and inclusion advocate. This time around, she'll be discussing what it means to be a neurodivergent in tech and how diverse thinking can play a crucial part in being innovative. As a neurodivergent woman whose love for coding has led her to become one of the most influential women in tech, Jennifer Opal strives to uplift voices of others, neurodivergent people in tech, and help them find their true selves. Please welcome Jennifer Opal. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Well, thank you. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and hello to everyone. And thank you so much for having me back. I'm really, really excited to be here, and I really hope that you enjoy my talk and that you take something from it. Um, Last year's talk was amazing. I had such a great time, and I was not expecting for my talk to have such an impact the way it did. So I'm really humbled and blessed by that. But I really hope you enjoy it. So thank you so much for the introduction as well. That's great, Maria.
No worries, please.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. So my name is Jennifer Opal. I'm a DevOps engineer with the HelloSign team at Dropbox. And as you can see here, I am a new diversity and inclusion advocate and a multi-award-winning blogger and speaker. So I'm really passionate about talking about new diversity, being a neurodivergent, being a Black woman in tech, and sharing my journey as much as possible in order to bring change and also to inspire people also. So the title here says being a neurodivergent DevOps engineer, the struggles and the wonders. And at the end of the talk, I'll make space to ensure that if you have any questions, I will be sure to answer them. Hopefully I can. So a bit about me, how did I get here? How did I get into tech? How did I become a DevOps engineer? And I think that it's sometimes important to kind of share that so people can understand where I came from, because I think that everyone's journey is different and sometimes it's not the same. And I want to be able to just give a brief intro into that. So I got my first introduction to coding in 2017 through Code First Girls, and I'm sure that many of you, for those especially in the UK, may be familiar with them. They are a social enterprise that works to bring more women and non-binaries into the tech space by introducing them to tech. Sorry, I got distracted. I'll explain how that happened in a moment. But fast forward to November 2018, I got onto a program which was in collaboration with BT. And the program at the time was the first of its kind in the UK, and it was called the Further Program. And it is now called the Nano Degree. And that program was a 3-month full-time intensive program with 30 other women. And we were all getting a huge immersive experience of coding, of learning Python, of understanding agile methodologies, and having just that experience and working and connecting with each other and learning from one another as well. It was an incredible experience. And from that program, once you finish projects and pass assessments, you would then go through to be interviewed for roles if you do succeed in doing that. And I was able to do that. And then I got offered my first role as a software engineer in 2019. And moved and packed up and left London and moved to Belfast, Northern Ireland. Completely different. But Belfast is beautiful. It's a beautiful city, and I definitely recommend that you go and check it out if you ever want to go and see somewhere like that. It's just, the scenery is amazing, absolutely stunning. And after about a year of being a software engineer working in test automation, I then moved into working with the DevOps big data team. And at the time I was joining, they were just starting to look at implementing DevOps into the way that they work, which is how I went from getting offered the role as a big data engineer and then coming back after Christmas and I'm a DevOps big data engineer. I wasn't ready. No one told me. And then last year I joined the HelloSign team at Dropbox as a DevOps engineer, and I work on US time, fully remote. Currently, I'm coming to you from the US, and it's very interesting, very different. But yeah, I think that's the benefit of working remotely. You can kind of work from anywhere. So it's been an amazing experience with that. And earlier this year, I joined the co-production board for a charity in the UK that launched in the Houses of Parliament this year called the Neurodiversity in Business. So be sure to check that out if you'd like to learn more about our work and how we are trying to work with loads of organizations to try and push for making their workplaces more neurodivergent friendly and welcoming. So that was the intro, quite the intro there. So DevOps is what? And this is a question that loads of people try. I think that if you Google what is DevOps, you'll have so many different definitions of what it is and so many different opinions on it. So I will break down what I found and what I believe it to be. So here, the Agile admin says that the DevOps is the practice of operations and development engineers participating together in the entire service lifecycle, from design through to the development process and to production support. And for my definition, I see it as it's a culture that brings together inclusiveness and human collaboration in order to create efficient practices of operations and development from the design stages to security, production, and release. So you can see that the definitions are quite similar, but I put a huge emphasis for me on culture, on collaboration, because I believe those are the two key things that are very, very important in the DevOps life cycle and in the DevOps practice. So that's why I decided to throw that in there, because that's what I believe it to be for me. So let me just move on to the next slide here. There we go. So DevOps is used differently in different teams. So sometimes when I speak to other people that I've connected with that are DevOps engineers, I find that their practice is sometimes done differently. And that's okay. You have to find ways to just work with what you have, find ways of applying DevOps to the team structure and discussing that and thinking about how can I make it work for me? How can we make it work for the team? How can we make it work for how we work together, and ensuring that the customer receives a great experience as well, so it doesn't impact the customer. So we have to find ways of making it work for us. So when I think about how DevOps works in my current team compared to how it was in my previous team, very different. We spent a lot of time in meetings. There's a huge emphasis on meetings to try and figure out how to make it work. But sometimes you could find that things kind of get pushed to the side, or we might miss a deadline here or there, or there's some misunderstanding or not much communication. So for that, I realized that the importance of communication, of culture, and collaboration was there, but not really there. So sometimes it can work, and there's some areas that it needs improving, but that's where you have to come together to kind of think about how to make it work and how to improve it. So when I look at for where I was a DevOps data engineer, some of the tools that we were using was Apache Uzi. And for those that aren't familiar with what that is, it's an open source workflow scheduler system, and it manages the Apache Hadoop jobs. And for those that don't know what Hadoop is, it's a framework that allows you to process large data sets. So at the time, we were just beginning to work on creating CI/CD pipelines, which is just around the time, I'd say about a few months just before I decided to move on to HelloSign. And we were just, I believe we were looking at GitLab and looking at how to use that and integrate that. In my team now, we use a variety of different tools. As you can see there, the stack is quite big and it changes all the time. And I think that's what's so interesting and exciting about DevOps as well, is that you might start off with using one thing and using a particular stack, but then you might find that a new tool comes out, or there's something else that might work that might be a bit better. And you have those conversations and think about how to integrate that. So we use Puppet very heavily. And it's a configuration management tool, and we use it in order to automate infrastructure management and configuration. We also use Terraform, and Terraform basically allows infrastructure to be expressed as code in a simple human readable language, using called HCL, which is HashiCorp config language, I believe. So there's a variety of tools there. I could literally go into detail, but I also want to be mindful of time as well, because I really want to get into talking about neurodiversity as well. So these are the different tools and stacks that we used in those teams. So as I said before, I really believe that for me, like the key to DevOps is collaboration and culture. Because if you think about it, how can we really give our ideas without that? We have to be able to give our ideas, give our contribution. How can we do that without collaboration? How can we do that without having a culture where it's safe, where it's supportive, where it's inclusive? Those are the key things as well. So I also feel like inclusion also plays a huge part in DevOps too, because without inclusion, there's no collaboration. And one of the key things in DevOps is collaboration for me. So that's why I emphasize that for me. But I'm sure that many people have different opinions on that, and that's completely fine. But yeah, that's where I stand on it. So I'm going to move on now to kind of talking about neurodivergent and what that means and how that looks like. So what does neurodivergent mean? So neurodivergent means, Google defines it as the differing in mental or neurological function from what is considered typical or normal, so not neurotypical. So for example, for me, I define the way that the way being neurodivergent looks like for me is that I have dyslexia, dyspraxia, and ADHD. And for many others, it appears in different ways as well. So you can have autism, Asperger's, there's so many. It's a huge umbrella. Dyscalculia, for example, as well. So there's many things that fit under that umbrella of being neurodivergent, and it's a relatively new term that many people that do identify as neurodivergent are using to identify themselves. So for someone like me, sometimes saying I'm neurodivergent is easier than saying exactly what I have. So I might start by saying I am neurodivergent. Someone might ask me how, and I will say this is how. So for me, from what you can see here, I can just read it out for you so you can understand the definitions of what it is I have and what it means. So dyslexia is a learning difficulty that primarily affects the skills involved in accurate and fluent word reading and spelling. And that's a definition by the British Dyslexia Association. Dyspraxia is a developmental coordination disorder, also known as DCD. And it's also known as dyspraxia is a common disorder affecting fine and or gross motor coordination. And that's also another definition by the British Dyslexia Association. And the final thing that I have is ADHD, and I have the combined type, which is both impulsive and hyper-focused. And for that, it's defined as a neurological disorder that impacts the parts of the brain that help us plan, focus on, and execute tasks. ADHD symptoms vary in subtype, inattentive, hyperactive, or combined. So for me, I have the combined type. So some of the ways that being neurodivergent looks like to me, this is just some of the points I want to put there, but I'm going to definitely go into detail to kind of discuss more about how it looks like for me. So I struggle with reading. So for me, I use a screen reader, and the screen reader that I use is called Read and Write. And I use that tool to be able to read text because my reading speed is incredibly slow. My comprehension isn't great, so I really struggle to formulate sentences too. So sometimes defining things using what sometimes people call big words is something that I struggle with. So I have to try and find ways of simplifying what I understand, or it might just be that I understand what it is that I do, or I understand a particular tool, or I understand something in my mind, but communicating that can sometimes be a challenge. So some other challenges that I face as well is that I have a difficulty focusing when reading. So I might start by reading a sentence and then lose track of that sentence. I might find that some of the words are moving around. I might just end up like my brain will suddenly pick up a word that's like a few sentences down or on the next page, and we'll just kind of throw it in there. And I'm suddenly reading a whole new paragraph and I have no idea how I got here. So that's, I mean, rarely, another thing as well is that a symptom for what some dyslexia, people with dyslexia experience is that we rarely read for pleasure. So sometimes you might find that we struggle to stimulate ourselves when reading. It can be overwhelming. So for me, I feel a physical overwhelming feeling when it comes to reading. So it might just, might start to feel a bit anxious. So I might just stop reading. I can't even tell you how many unfinished books I have in my Kindle library. Like it's a lot, but it's common. So it might sometimes be that for someone that is neurotypical, they might be able to read a chapter, be able to read it, be able to recall what they read, be able to explain what they read. I can't do that. It might take me a day to read a chapter with a screen reader, but I might struggle to actually recall what it is I just read. So I might have to go back and read that chapter again. So repetition really helps in me being able to kind of retain the information that I do read. And also having a screen reader is a really beneficial tool for me to help me to be able to read. Dyspraxia dyspraxia, I might find that I continuously repeat myself. I struggle with eye contact. So I'll find myself like literally looking everywhere else, just because it's such a struggle for me. And I don't really know exactly the reasons why, the scientific reasons behind that. But eye contact is a struggle for me. I have poor visual perception and I also have poor memory as well, especially short-term memory. So I did have, for example, a situation when I was working, when I first got into my first role, at my previous role, where we had our training or we kind of talked through a project, and the next day I didn't remember what exactly we did. So when I asked, can you help me, can you kind of explain what we did on that project? And they said, you don't remember what we did? And I said, no. And they said, well, it was only yesterday. That, not a good thing. For me, it kind of made me feel like, am I silly? Am I incapable? But it's literally just my brain just didn't remember. And I had to think about, okay, how can I make myself retain information? And for me, repetition does help. Doesn't always help, but it does help for me. But that's a struggle that I have in terms of just life. It is not just in terms of remembering things that I read, but I might forget dates. I could forget to reply to emails. So I think that even a lot of people that have contacted me sometimes will be like, she takes a while to get back to you. And it'll be like, I've read the email. It's just that my brain's like, oh, the urgency is not there. So sometimes I can struggle with realizing that I might think that it takes a couple of days to reply to an email and a week has flown by. Another thing as well with that I struggle with is I struggle with emotional regulation. So what you might find, which is something very common with those that are neurodivergent or have ADHD, is that we might really struggle with understanding our emotions. So for example, someone giving me feedback, it's just feedback, but my mind and my body and my emotions will struggle to process that as feedback. It will process it because we have poor regulation of our emotions. We process it as we take it personally, or we might pick out like the negative sides of that feedback and kind of like direct it inwards and feel like we're not doing well, or we critique ourselves a lot. So that's something that I struggle with too. But then on top of that, which I didn't mention earlier, is that I also have anxiety. So, and I was diagnosed with anxiety in early 2021. So for me, when it comes to my emotions, it's amplified even more, having anxiety as well, because I'm still learning to manage that. And sometimes I could be in my head so much that I could struggle to actually just process that the feedback is not an attack on me not being able to do my job. It's just that I just have to take that and think about working on it. But sometimes my brain can process it as something completely different, and my body can physically react to that. So I might find that I sit still. I sometimes rock back and forth if I'm trying to process my emotions, which a lot of neurodivergent minds do. And yeah, it can just sometimes be just something that I go through for me, but it presents differently in different people. I also struggle to get started on tasks and completing tasks. I also mentioned that I'm forgetful, and I also mentioned I struggle with time too. But yeah, so those are some of the challenges that I face with how it looks like for me. And also another thing with being with the impulsive side of my ADHD is that I talk excessively, which is probably makes sense. That's why I'm a speaker, because I talk too much. But yeah, so that's just one of the things. So I can move on to the next slide here. So some of the wonders of being neurodivergent as well, they exist. You know, I think that I start with talking about the struggles because I feel like sometimes when it comes to, let's say, particularly ADHD, I'll say there's always like a stigma. Oh, people with ADHD, they can hyper focus and get loads of work done. Not always the case, and sometimes it's a struggle with that, you know. But even hyper focus is not something that everyone with ADHD experiences. It has its benefits, 100%. I love the fact that, you know, I'm able to put some noise cancelling headphones on, which helps me because I get very easily distracted. Like the slightest noise can literally take me away from my desk for half an hour. But it really helps to be able to find techniques to help me to kind of manage those things. So I know how to ensure that I don't let being neurodivergent or the symptoms and things like that, how it presents in me, take me away from giving my best into what I do. So people with dyslexia are known to be very creative thinkers, very critical, logical thinkers. Those with we also are known to be very energetic. Those that have ADHD as well, we're known to be very energetic. But as a whole, in an umbrella, being neurodivergent means that we just look at the world differently. We look at problems differently. We solve problems differently, and we can sometimes bring a different perspective that someone that is neurotypical just doesn't see. And I think that's what makes being neurodivergent such a incredible thing, and it's not a detriment. For some people, I've had that myself. I've had people make jokes to me about being dyslexic, and yes, I can struggle with my words. Yes, I can struggle with my time management. Yes, I can struggle. I need additional tools to help me to navigate what it is that I'm doing on a day-to-day, whether it be at work or outside of work. But it doesn't mean that I don't exist. It doesn't mean that I can't exist. It doesn't mean that I can't do what I do and do it well, right? Because that's how I've gotten this far. It's helped me to get this far. So for my dyslexia, some tools that I use, I recommended the screen reader, Read and Write. I also use the Pomodoro technique. It's very popular for those that are neurodivergent and also those that aren't. For those that want to find ways of managing their time, might just be that they want to block out time for them to just chuck it themselves in there and get some work done, or schedule out their time better. The Pomodoro technique is a lifesaver. The standard is 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. Doesn't have to be like that. Try it out, see how it works. For me, when it comes to 25 minutes, it takes me about 20 minutes for the hyperfocus to even kick in. So my sessions, 45 minutes and then 15 minutes break. And I do about 2 sessions of those in one go. Then I go on my lunch break and I do 2 more sessions. I take another long break and then do it again. So that could be something that you can try and do if you're thinking about ways of managing your time better, because time blindness is something that many people experience that are neurodivergent. And I say that as well because there's a lot of overlap with the traits and the behaviors that we exhibit from being neurodivergent, and there's also a lot of similarities. So there's definitely a lot of overlap with dyspraxia and ADHD and anxiety too. There is a lot of overlap with that as well. So also it's really helpful to try and think about how it looks like for you. What do you notice about yourself? What do you notice in terms of, do you see yourself sometimes, like for myself, for example, when I'm trying to, sometimes when I'm disassociating or when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I might start to just rock back and forth like this, just like that. And it just switches on. It's not something that I just be like, oh, I'm going to start rocking back and forth. It's not something that it just literally just happens. And maybe you can start to look and just see how it presents. And there's also, the option of looking at speaking to a medical professional or educational psychotherapist, and speaking to them and getting them to write a report that will help you to understand how they've been able to kind of see how your behaviors exhibit. And it does help you as well to know what kind of support that you need. So yeah, let's move to the next one. So how can you support your neurodivergent colleagues? The most important thing is to ensure that you just create a safe space. And I know that the term safe space, sometimes people kind of be like, ugh, this sounds like a tweet or something like that, or a TikTok giving advice, being like, I don't know who needs to hear this. No, it's nothing like that. It's literally the importance of creating a safe space is creating an inclusive environment. Make your colleagues feel safe enough to be comfortable enough to share that they are neurodivergent. Unfortunately, in some organizations and just in the world that we live in, when you are different, you're treated differently, and it can go well, it can also go not so well. So we want to be able to create the environment where someone can come to you, whether it be a colleague, whether it be a senior in your team, whether it be a manager, and say, hey, I am dyslexic, I have autism, and I just wanted to share that. You don't need to, when someone comes to you with that, them sharing that with you is because they believe that you've created a safe environment for them to be able to share that with you. That's a powerful thing. And with that, you can just say, thank you for sharing. Create that safe space to say, what do you need from me? How can we help support you with this? And it might just be they don't know yet. And that happens because being neurodivergent, especially for me, I was diagnosed as an adult. I was diagnosed in 2017, early 2018. And I'm still learning to understand just how being neurodivergent looks like for me. I have a huge report that's like 30 pages long, and it's overwhelming sometimes. And I look at that report, and in those reports as well, they measure your IQ. I don't know why they do that, but they do. And for myself, they tell me that I have a low IQ. And when you read that, when you spent kind of like a lot of your life and you've gone through, you've gone to sixth form, you've gone to high school, and you've always been described as someone intelligent, someone that's bright, someone that's capable, things that have always been positive. And then sometimes reading things like that can have you thinking, whoa, does that mean that I'm dumb? Does that mean that I can't do this? Does that mean that I can't do that? Does that mean that I'm not capable of anything? It can be quite traumatic as well, being diagnosed with that, because I really looked back and I thought, imagine the difference it would have made if I was diagnosed as a child. If that was just something that was picked up, it would have made such a difference in my development, in my skill development as well. So now it's like, I was 27 when I was diagnosed, and now it's like I have to kind of go back and learn about what that looks like for me. And I'm kind of learning how to read again, if that makes sense, and learning about myself in a new way. And that's okay. But when the importance here is that you just allow them to know that if there's anything that they need, they can come to you. If there's any accommodations that they need, they can come to you, and you can provide that support. That's the best thing you can do. The next thing you can do is educate yourself. It's no one's responsibility to educate you. It's your responsibility to educate yourself. And even for myself, I still continue to educate myself on my own identities and also being neurodivergent because it looks differently for different people. So I have a responsibility to continue to educate myself on how that looks like so that I'm not just being inclusive in my action and in my words, but also being empathetic and being understanding and also ensuring that I have some understanding of what it is that someone could be coming into the workplace with or someone that I could be working with is and what support I can offer them too. So some resources I've listed here. So let me just slide back to the there we go. So this is a whole bunch of books. So I put lots of different books here. It's not just about being neurodivergent, educating yourself on intersectionality, because as a neurodivergent person, I'm also Black, I'm also queer. There's a big umbrella there. There's a lot of things about my identity that I'm bringing into the workplace. There's also a lot of perspectives and dynamics and things that I'm bringing into an environment. And the important thing is to ensure that the environment that I'm working with, the team that I'm working with, and the colleagues that I'm working with, the manager that I have, that they practice inclusivity. That really, really does help in ensuring that, for example, for myself, I'm able to come to work as my full self. I don't need to hide anything. I don't need to mask or hide my symptoms because as someone that is Black, as a Black person, as a Black woman, I've been kind of known to be, a lot of Black people can relate to code switching sometimes. You'll be like, okay, I'm entering an environment where I am one of few Black people here. So I might suddenly start to talk or act differently in order to be seen as acceptable. And that's something that happens with many people of different backgrounds and religions and ethnicities and race as well. And then on top of that, my queerness, then on top of that, being a neurodivergent woman. So it's really important that inclusivity is practiced. So there's a lot of books here. You've got The Neurodiverse Workplace by Victoria Honeybourne. I'm reading from the bottom down. That's how you know there's so much disorder. I'll start from the top. So Intersectionality, Key Concept by Patricia Hill Collins. On Intersectionality, Essential Writings by Kimberly Crenshaw. The Urgency of Intersectionality by Kimberly Crenshaw. And that's a talk that you can find on YouTube. It's an incredible talk. I think it's about 15-20 minutes long. I highly encourage you to go and have a listen to that. It's absolutely brilliant. The Art of Showing Up, How to Be There for Yourself and Your People by Rachel Winkle Miller. Demystifying Disability, What to Know, What to Say, and How to Be an Ally by Emily Ledoux. The Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias by Pamela Fuller, Mark Murphy, and Anne Chow. Blind Spot, Hidden Biases of Good People by Mazarin R. Banaji and Anthony G. Greenwald. The Phoenix Project by Jean Kim, Kevin Bear, and George Spafford. And The Neurodiverse Workplace by Victoria Honeybourne. I thought I would read it out just in case for those that can't read it because it is quite small. So there's lots of useful resources there. You'll find a lot of TED Talks as well, talking about various topics that I've discussed today. And I definitely want to put the book in there about allyship, because allyship is also really important as well in the practice of inclusivity in the workplace environment, for supporting your colleagues that have come from various walks of life, and also in the practice of DevOps too. I really believe that, because I believe that inclusivity, allyship, collaboration, and culture, they all come hand in hand. So I really think that it's important that you take the time to educate yourself so that you're able to also contribute to creating a safe environment for your colleagues and and for everyone around you, not just within work, but also outside of it. And that is that. So that is me. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you found this insightful, and I hope that from me sharing my story about being in DevOps, but also just being a neurodivergent person and my experiences with that you see that being neurodivergent isn't a deficit. Being neurodivergent isn't something to be worried about or to look to judge, because sometimes people look at us and be like, you can't do this or you're not capable of this, but we very much are. So I hope that you've learned something. I hope that you've gained something from this. And the last thing I would say as well is, for those that do have anxiety like myself, I just want to send love to you. And I know how challenging it is to have that, especially with your mental health. It's so, so difficult. But you're not alone in that. There are resources out there too. I wish I put together some resources. Therapy has been a huge help for me, not just in terms of managing my anxiety and understanding it, but also being a neurodivergent person too. I've really been able to understand more about how it looks like for me. So just wanted to just send some love, please, for that. So yeah, if you want to connect with me, you can find me here. My website is jenniferopal.co. If you want to learn more about me and my journey, you can find me on Twitter. I don't always talk tech. Sometimes I talk about reality shows and the Real Housewives of Atlanta. That's just how I am. You can also find me on LinkedIn and Polywork under the name of Jennifer Opal, and you can check out my blog at theopalblog.com. So thank you so much for having me.
That was amazing, Jennifer. Thank you so much. I loved everything about it. Thank you.
Thank
Um,
you.
let's go to some questions now. So let's see the first one. Very happy this is being talked about in this conference. There should be more awareness about neurodivergency and its struggles, but also positive impacts. Was involved with the neurodivergent working group in my previous role.
Fantastic. I love that. I think it is really important. I think that it's not talked about enough, but I'm glad that I'm starting to see, especially in the last few years, I feel like I'm starting to see more and more people talk about it and the importance of it. So I'm really happy. Thank you.
Yeah, you could talk about it, you know. Let's see here. Hi, Jennifer. What got you into public speaking and becoming an advocate for neurodivergency in tech?
Yeah, public speaking, it was accidental. I was at my previous role at BT as a big data engineer there, and when I first arrived, I realized quite quickly, but realizing that I was the only Black person working for BT in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and being the only one, and I was trying to find people that also look like me, but then being in an environment where you are the only one that looks like you, and it's like I felt incredibly lonely. And it's a building of I think it was about 500 people, 500, 600 people in that head office. And it's just me. And I once asked the question to the CTO, one of the CTOs at BT, who came for a stand up with senior leadership. And I asked them, why am I the only one here? You know, I grew up with BT, like, why am I the only one here? And it really got them to kind of challenge, really think about that and be like, thank you for sharing that. Let's have that conversation, you know. And I was invited into the space to have that conversation. And then I went ahead and did a blog kind of venting and sharing my experiences of what that was like for me, but also educating people on the importance of how being the only one can have a huge impact on your mental health as well. So I spoke about it, put a blog out while I was still working there. At the time, I had no idea that he was the CTO, to be honest with you. So that's kind of a bad thing for me. But sharing that blog and putting it out there was kind of the beginning of me realizing the importance of sharing my story and the importance of my voice. And eventually I started to get more comfortable in talking about being neurodivergent, because I was also still kind of processing the shock of being diagnosed as a neurodivergent person. So I shared that. I started talking about that more and more, and realizing that there really wasn't a lot of people talking about it. And as someone that does need accommodations, that's someone that's still going through life journey of learning how that looks like for me, I want to be able to speak about that more. And I never expected for it to create all of this. And I think that for me, the lesson for me was that I realized just the importance in your voice and sharing your story. And it doesn't have to be on a platform like LinkedIn. Like, not everyone is into social media like that. Neither am I, to be honest with you. I tend to just tweet and just run off and just see what happens. But even with those around you, even in your family, close friends, like, the importance of sharing your story, really you have no idea the impact that can have on other people. So that's how I kind of fell into it. Kind of a tangent, which is what people with ADHD do. We just kind of connect the dots and stuff.
Absolutely. That's great. It's really important to create that awareness. Um,
Absolutely.
let's see, comment from Thomas. Thank you for this talk, Jennifer. There is a lot of neurodiversity in my family, and I have been on a working group looking at this in my current workplace. I am very keen to see a future work environment that embraces neurodiversity and allows people to fulfill their full potential.
Absolutely. Thank
It's
you so
amazing.
much, Thomas, for sharing that. And
Yeah.
yes, like, neurodiversity is just it's a powerful thing. I think it's something that people still struggle to understand, but there is so much. There, like I said, there's so many wonders that come with being neurodivergent. Definitely a lot of struggles, because what I'm not going to say is that it's. Cause I know that the term is that it's a superpower. It definitely is, but there's also some struggles that come with it. It has its benefits, it has its wonders, it also has its struggles. But anyone can really excel in anything that they do. And I also, all of my siblings are neurodivergent, all of them. And we were all diagnosed later in life. So one of my brothers was literally just diagnosed um, the year after I was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia, and he is about to graduate with a cybersecurity degree, and he's incredibly intelligent. Um, his report says he has a high IQ as well. So it's like, some people might think ADHD and dyslexia, but no, like, the way that people think is so different, that they can really bring so a different perspective to things, and it's of such value. So I'm really excited to see the topic and the conversation about neurodiversity being talked about more, not just within the workplace, but also outside of it with our families, and for people to see examples of people that are excelling and growing in whatever it is that they want to do as a neurodivergent person. So yeah, I'm excited.
Amazing, great. And you touched points about books. So I have here a question. Hi, Jennifer. Which books would you recommend to learn more about neurodivergent types and diagnose my own neurodivergent type, or other resources?
Yeah, so neurodivergent types. I can't think of a book that talks about every single area of being neurodivergent. There is a book, and I'm gonna get it up. Excuse me while I grab my Kindle here. Um, there is a book that you can get on Kindle that talks about being neurodivergent, but it really does focus on um, ADHD, I believe, or is it just autism? Let me see. Yeah, this one talks about autism. So it's called Neurotribes. I'll type that in the chat as well so you can see. So Neurotribes, the legacy of autism. I haven't been able to find a book that talks about all of it as a whole. So if anyone has any suggestions, definitely feel free to drop it in the comments, because I haven't been able to find one. But you'll tend to find books that tends to focus on some areas of being neurodivergent, but not necessarily talk about the whole thing,
Right.
because it is a big, big topic. And in terms of diagnosing your own neurodivergent type, there is a resource that I know about. I'm going to just do a quick Google and find it, and I'll link it. It's not something that you can, I wouldn't say that it's an official diagnosis. It can be more of a guide. Um, and it provides tests on ADHD and autism specifically. But I'd also recommend speaking to your GP as well, and asking them to refer you to an educational psychologist who'll be able to refer you, and he'll be able to do a test and ask you some questions and go through a questionnaire with you, test out your writing, how you hold a pen. I can't I don't know how to hold a pen properly. So they'll kind of go through those tests and be able to give you a diagnosis in that way. So I'd highly recommend speaking to your GP first. But I'll have a look at the resource now to see if I can find the test, and I'll drop it in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And while you were looking for the link, I have a question. So you said a lot during your presentation about having an inclusive team, collaborative team. I was wondering, how would you approach and explain to your manager about being neurodivergent?
Yeah. Well, I think. Oh, I found the test, so I'll paste it here. I think that the first thing for me, because well, the way that me and my manager have a conversation is that we tend to keep we'll have like topics that we've written down in like a documentation to kind of keep track of what we've discussed in previous one-to-ones, which really helps me as well, because I can forget literally what I did the other day. So this helps me to kind of keep track and be like, oh yeah, we talked about this last week, talked about this week. But I think just sharing it, but share it in your own time is when you're ready. Because it's a big thing, you know, to share that, whether it be sharing that you are neurodivergent, that you've been recently diagnosed. Take the time within yourself and ask, and just pace yourself first, and just say, this is what's happened recently, and you can just say, so let's say, for example, I wanted to let you know, I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. I'm still processing that diagnosis. May require some additional accommodations, but I wanted to make you aware of that. You might want to say that to give them a heads up, or you might decide that you want to wait until you find out what accommodations you need, and be able to kind of two birds, one stone, that type of thing. Because that's the type of person that I am. I'll be like, I'm telling you this, and this. There you go. Like, I literally just drop it all in there. So definitely take the time. Don't feel that because you've been diagnosed like a week ago, a month ago, even a year ago, like, be ready for yourself first before you share it with your manager. And when you look at the accommodations, be comfortable in sharing that. Like, just be okay with sharing that. And don't feel, if your manager makes you feel that you sharing it is an issue, or that it's a burden, or that it's a problem, it's not your fault. It's them. It's always going to be them, because you are coming as you are, and you are who you are. You cannot help or change or medicate being neurodivergent. Your brain is the way it is. There's no cure for it. But what they have to do is ensure that they provide a supportive environment so that you continue to reach your full potential while working with that team and working with them. So never feel that you sharing that and them making you feel like it's an issue, don't take it internally. Always think about it as that. If they are making you feel that me being who I am is an issue, I'm going to have to ask myself the question, can I grow here? Can I be safe here? Can I excel here? Can I be my full self here? Or do I need to think about finding somewhere else to do that? And it happens, and that's okay to ask yourself that question as well. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. I loved it. Thank you so much. And let's jump to Tim. So, Tim, I just lost another job, non IT, because of social anxiety and inability to focus working nights. I am very creative and spiritual too, but cannot focus on repetitive tasks or interact with people for long. Any suggestions?
Yeah, okay. Interacting people for interacting with people for too long. I think it depends. I think, because I struggle with that when it comes to face to face. So if like in-person conversation, I do struggle with in-person interactions. Um, I would say that if it's like a, let's say, a virtual environment, there's no, I think one thing that helped me is more so sending messages rather than talking with them face to face, because I find that I'm able to kind of type in and say what I need to say, and I can edit the what I'm trying to say, and I can um, use my screen reader to check what it is I'm trying to say in a message and send that. So it makes it easier for me. Um, in terms of like in person and talking to someone in person, it's so I don't know. I feel like it's a struggle because I haven't worked in person. It's so long. I haven't seen people in so long, so that's a really difficult one for me to give advice on. But I would say that it's okay to step away. If you feel like the conversation is getting too much, you can step away. Something that I sometimes do is that if I'm having a conversation, I'll be like, "Can you just excuse me for a moment?" And I'll step away and just go. Maybe I'll go to the bathroom, kind of recharge, or if I'm in the middle of a thought and I lose that thought, I can be like, give me a moment to just collect my thoughts or come back to me. I think sometimes we kind of struggle to kind of express what it is that we need, because sometimes people will be like have that face like, okay, kind of that reaction, and then when they do that, you instantly sometimes kind of you shut down, because that happens to me all the time. If I'm like looking at someone and I'm trying to make eye contact, or I'm very engaged in a conversation or in my train of thought, someone could look away, someone could sigh, or their body language can kind of be like, what's going on? And it can kind of put you off. And if you're like being neurodivergent, I already know you're creative. We're all creative. We're creative beings. We are.
Amazing.
And but if for those that if you are creative, just think about what it is that you enjoy. And that's really, really hard for us because we can literally find joy in a lot of things. So I play the piano, I code, I got into a phase last year where I was trying to make 3D models using Blender. I don't know how I ended up over there. And then I suddenly started using Unity 3D, looking at making a 3D museum. I don't know how I ended up there either. It has nothing to do with my day to day, what I do. But sometimes we just get very interested in things. It's okay to focus and try and like think about, maybe I'm going to try and try this thing or try that thing, and give yourself time and think about just how it made you feel and whether you enjoy it or not. So
Absolutely.
it's okay to tap into that.
And life is a
Yeah,
whole experience. So being curious and trying things is amazing. The more you try,
yeah.
the more you know about yourself.
Oh yeah. Oh,
So Tim,
something else. Yeah, sorry. I
sorry,
saw that too.
Tim has added, I can spend hours designing or coding and lose track of time, but find normal day-to-day life difficult. Do you think
Yeah.
that the Pomodoro technique would be helpful in this case?
Yeah, so I use the Pomodoro technique to manage my cleaning. So what I can sometimes find is, because when I'm feeling anxious, I don't clean. My room becomes a whole mess. Like, it's not like a mess where there's baked beans on the walls, like nothing like that. Like, okay, but like it's different for everyone, but not for me. It might just be clothes on the floor, or the bed is a mess or something like that. So what I will find is that having the Pomodoro technique has helped me to kind of schedule out my time. There is an app you can download called Focus To Do, and you create a to-do list in that, so you can kind of have maybe like 2 or 3 tasks, and and details is something that we struggle to do. We can just make it like, I'm going to make the bed and I'm going to pick up the plates from my bedroom floor. 25 minutes, start. You do that, and once the session is over, you have your 5 minute break, and then you're able to kind of think about what you're going to do in the next session. But Pomodoro techniques has helped me as well to manage my cleaning and my day-to-day schedules, reminding myself, because I can sometimes get distracted with cleaning, that I forget that I didn't brush my teeth that morning and I have to brush my teeth in the afternoon instead. It happens. We just kind of lose track of things. So writing those little tasks can really, really help. So the Focus To Do app, you can find that on Android, and I think you can get it on desktop too, and on the iPhone as well. And you also have the flip clock, which I don't think you can put a to-do list in, but it can help you in terms of managing your time. So yeah, those are 2 apps that I would recommend, so that you can kind of have that alert go off, or kind of ring a bell when that time is up, and suddenly you're just like, whoa. And sometimes I can snap you out of the hyper focus, so that you can focus on other things, and take a break, and make sure you're prioritizing your mental health. Make sure that you're eating, drinking water, taking that break. It's not an easy thing to do. I still struggle myself to this day, but kind of trying to create that slow habit. And eventually, with time, sometimes it'll start to kick in, you start to adjust to it. But I hope that helps.
Amazing. Thank you. And then a comment here from Colvin. Hey, Jennifer, I am the tech recruiter in a SaaS health tech company. I am wondering if we can connect on LinkedIn for a quick conversation about some ideas on how I can improve our neurodiversity hiring in our processes.
Yeah, sure. Be sure to drop me a message on LinkedIn. Calvin. Yeah, I'll definitely look out for you. Thank you.
And then Jay said, how do you stay organized, planned when working? I'm guessing the apps also help, like you just mentioned it, right?
Yes. So I have the Flip Clock app, which is really, really beneficial for me. So I use that. It's like a big timer. So I have a second monitor here. It's a big timer, so I'm kind of seeing the clock kind of tick back, tick back, tick back, and it kind of helps me with that. Another thing that I use is I write down my tasks for the day, and I will write it in colored pen, so I don't use black ink on white paper because I already struggle with that anyway. But using bright colors really helps me to kind of to focus and see what I'm writing. And then using a whole nother color to kind of tick off what I've got on my to-do list. It does help me manage my time. It is a struggle though, because as someone that is neurodivergent, I struggle with details. For other people, they don't, but for me, I struggle with kind of breaking down tasks. I'll have a very generic thing. I can say, for example, I need to finish documentation, but I won't break down exactly what that documentation is, or break down what part of the documentation that I need to include. Do I need to talk about the architecture? Do I need to do an architecture diagram using Miro, for example? I don't break it down enough. So that's something that I have to work on for myself too. So that's something that you can also do. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Amazing. Thank you. I know you touched point on the DevOps in the beginning of your presentation. So Deepika wants to know, how can I get a job in DevOps? So how was it for you to get into DevOps? What worked for you? So maybe you can share it.
Yeah, this is a difficult one because I kind of fell into it, if that makes sense. Um, and I was taught everything I needed to know a lot about DevOps from where I was before when I was working at BT. So I learned a lot from them. I would say that there is a DevOps Foundations course on LinkedIn Learning. You may find a similar one on Udemy as well. That will give you an introduction into understanding what DevOps is. I would say that the key to being a DevOps engineer is understanding what the practice is and what it means. I think that really helps in understanding what it is. Because I get this question all the time, but a lot of times, sometimes people don't understand what it entails. So I will start with understanding the foundations, learning about DevOps, learning about continuous integration, continuous development, continuous deployment, all those processes. I can recommend a really, really amazing blog from a senior site reliability engineer who I really look at as a mentor because she's amazing. Her name is Yasmin Taylor. You can find her on LinkedIn as well. She has an amazing blog that kind of details what DevOps is and some tools as well. And I even still use it myself. So I'm going to link the blog in the chat and you can have a look as well. But that will have a lot of resources as well and the different tools that you can learn about within DevOps, but also be patient. DevOps is huge, huge. There's so much to learn about it. There's so many tools. And even for me, there's a lot of tools within my team now at HelloSign that I am still learning about and I have not even touched yet. So give yourself time and give yourself grace and be patient with your journey. So I will just chuck that in the comments here, or I'll pass it in the private chat and they can paste it in there because I can't seem to paste in the comments. But yeah, I'll paste it in there and you can have a look at that as well. So hopefully this is useful because it's useful for me. So hopefully it'll be useful for you too.
Thank you. And I think as well, being part of events like this, speaking with other DevOps, reaching out to people, that could be also helpful.
Oh, 100%. Networking as well, huge, huge, huge. Twitter has an amazing tech community. I'm in there all the time. And I always use the hashtag Black Tech Twitter. So I connected with a lot of people. That's the community for the tech community for Black people in the tech space, wanting to learn, but also those that are trying to get into the tech space, maybe into a technical or non-technical role, and they want to engage with people that are in the role and learn from them. So yeah, get on Twitter. That's a really, really good space to connect with other DevOps engineers and to just learn from them too. And sometimes they host like Twitter spaces as well, where you can come up and ask questions. So that could be a really useful tool.
Amazing. Thank you. I wish we had more time. Thank you so much. You went by super quickly. The presentation was amazing. Thank you for answering some of the questions. It was a pleasure to have you here at DevLab.